As you're exploring food safety plans, you're going to hear the term SOP, and that stands for Standard Operating Procedure. In essence, it's instructions on how to do different tasks. Now, you may be someone who is using SOPs and using these documents or pieces of information to help inform how you do your work. You actually may also be someone who's designing these SOPs, and you may need to know what's essential to be in a successful SOP. So that's what we're going to explore today. Let's jump to the PowerPoint. So at the end of this video, you will be able to describe what is required in a food safety SOP, identify the key headings in typical SOPs, apply tactics to make SOPs meaningful for your users, and apply tactics to make SOP writing more efficient. So, what is an SOP? Well, it is a standard operating procedure, and these are the tasks that are necessary to make a system run. And so we take the time to write instructions in a really detailed way so that different users can do the task in a meaningful way every single time, make fewer mistakes, and know what to do if a mistake happens. And so that's what these operating procedures are for. They're integral in a lot of quality systems, and we're going to be using them in our food safety plans, whether that's a HACCP plan or a preventive control program. So, why SOPs? Well, these are clear instructions. Who does the task? When do they do the task? Where are they recording results? Really, in essence, if we think about it, it goes back to those who, what, when, where, why, and how. And so we're really detailed with that information. Now, if we really think about those key questions, we can ask all sorts of things about a task. I put up a photo of some of my students here, and we were doing a task of dehydrating some apples. We could ask the question, who? Well, it is going to be the food process operators. What are they doing? They are dehydrating apples. Here's the task to do it. You slice the apples this way, you put them in the tray this way, how often do you need to do this task? Every time we're required to do production. Where are you doing it? Production kitchen. Why are we doing it? So that we have dehydrated apples. And we're going through a really detailed process to give instructions on how to do the task. So we can add more layers of detail. The more in essence, a good SOP contains those 5 whys, and you will see in some of the examples that we've got really complex SOPs and we've got really simple SOPs. But the basis of a good SOP is going to cover these core questions. Why are we doing it? Who is doing it? Who wrote the procedure? That's also important because we need to have accountability. If there's something that needs to get changed, we need to know who to reach out to. What steps do you need to do? How do you do it? When do you do it? Where do you do it? And where do you record that you did it? So that's really the foundation of every single SOP that we write. Now, as I mentioned before, SOPs are often coming from quality management systems such as ISO, and that is going to add its own layer of complexity. But really, I highlighted the words what, where, why, when, how when I was writing out these definitions, but we've got a title. What are we doing? And if we need to reference it back out to a food safety code, maybe from an SQF manual or a BRC manual or an FSSC 22000 manual, we may have to do some reference coding. That purpose, why are we doing it? The scope, how does this apply to the system? The frequency, when do we have to do it and how often do we have to do it? Sometimes we may have to reference things. So if we have to reference any regulations or codes, do we need any definitions if there's complex words? Roles and responsibilities relates back to that who is doing the work. The procedure, again, what steps are we doing to do the task? Now, this is where we're adding some complexity, a deviation procedure. So if the task or related functions are being done wrong, how do we fix it? Associated records is how and where we are recording that task being done. A version history, now that's also a little bit of added complexity. This just allows us to know what version of the document we're on. It's okay to change and improve the document. That's the wonder of continuous improvement, that we may have a document that we wrote once upon a time, and then we may say, you know what, here's actually how the system works better, and let's improve the document. So now we have a version 2 or a version 3. And then last but not least, those approval signatures. Who checked to make sure that the procedure is actually going to function the way that it is meant to work? So, but if we really go back to it, all those who, what, where, when, why, how, those questions are in every single one of the definitions of what's in a good SOP. So, some key points here. When writing effective SOPs, whether that's for your own team to be using, and again, I mentioned this before, you might be a user of SOPs or you might be a designer of SOPs. We want to keep the language clear and simple because we need to know who is going to use those SOPs and write them for them. And quite often in the food or agriculture industries, our workers are wonderful and intelligent people, but they may have different skills in literacy. They may have different language skills. And so we have to be really appreciative of that many of the workers that are in the agri-food sector have a wide range of skills and may not have the traditional education of literacy that we have, but we have other skills that are really important. So this is something that there's a lot of conversation about, that in many cases it's really great to have graphical or video based SOPs to make things really clear. And well done, they can be extremely meaningful. And in other cases, it could mean writing your SOPs in different languages so that people can access them. Or it could mean that you have a full complex SOP and a simplified version. The main thing is you've got to know who has to use these SOPs and who needs to derive meaning from them and make sure that they're designed for them. So I just went and found some different examples. And again, this is a reminder, there's tons of SOPs that are available on the internet. I found this one at feedkitchens.org, and it just happens to be a SOP on using and calibrating thermometers. And again, it's got a purpose, a scope. It's got some of those key words or definitions. We've got the instructions on how to do the task. And then it talks about how we observe that task occurring, or what we call monitoring in this case. Now, I may also say monitoring sometimes is about documenting the system, but the main thing is that they're going through that task and they know how frequently they need to be doing the task. Then jumping out here, there's a corrective action. So just in case the thermometer isn't working properly, or if the employee didn't do the task properly, how to fix the situation. And then, of course, we've got that record keeping. What was the date that it was implemented and who did any reviewing and revision? There are lots of SOPs available online, and this is something that I often face when working with new teams doing food safety plans. They often say, oh my gosh, there's so many SOPs to write. Go and find examples and use them as catalysts to help move your writing faster and more efficiently. And in other cases, you can actually go and buy entire SOP sets. And there are different non-governmental organizations that have provided SOPs as a public service, and that those can be used and modified and adapted for your business needs. Here's one that combines visual and graphics. So we've got instructions, but we've also got some interesting little graphics that help illustrate what the task is going to be. And this is also one that's about thermometer calibration. So this one was from fooddocs.com. And again, it's a very simple instruction sheet that allows people to know very quickly if their thermometer is working. Now, we're also starting to see a lot of photographic or video-based SOPs. And that's where you can go in with your camera or your video phone and capture the task being done in a meaningful way. You could put it in as a web link or as a QR code into your SOP, that then it makes it easier. Something that we're talking about doing in my own institution is actually putting QR codes on pieces of equipment on laminated stock so that if we're doing a sanitation, they don't get destroyed, but so that if an end user is unsure how to use the equipment, they can quickly snap that QR code and be able to see the instructions on how to fix that equipment. So again, feel free to think creatively as long as you're covering off those important aspects of the instructions. What needs to be done, how frequently, who needs to do it, all of those core topics. They can be done graphically or through different language tools. main thing is find something that's effective for the people that need to use it. So again, ways to get started. Writing everything in the beginning is really hard. And oftentimes I see teams that are really stuck in that space of inertia saying, oh my goodness, we have to write so many dozens or in some cases even hundreds of SOPs, and it's going to be so hard. Especially if you're a small business, take a look at some of the different template SOPs that are from governments and non-governmental organizations. And many of those are available for free for Creative Commons use. So you can use them and readapt them for your purposes within your institution or within your establishment. In other cases, in some cases with respects to HACCP or food safety programs, you can actually go and buy entire uh, guidance SOPs to get you started. And those are available for purchase, and it can really speed things up. If you consider, let's say it was to take 3, maybe 6 months to write an entire HACCP program from scratch versus having something that you can modify for perhaps a couple $100 US, it really speeds things up quite considerably in terms of the labor cost. And last but not least, don't be afraid to make diagrams, take photos, and make videos to make your SOPs meaningful for workers. And I'm going to leave you with some photos of my own team here. We brought in some new equipment, and you can see our Professor Sunan Wang is taking some video of the commissioning of the equipment so that we would be able to use the equipment again and be able to embed some of that video into our instructions so that we could use the equipment for can seam integrity testing on different beverage cans. All right, if you have questions, feel free to reach out and we'll jump over to some of the activities now.